How you doing? It's gonna be all sorts of horrors I don't know about yet, but there we are. John, how can I see you?
Well, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
How you doing?
I heard a lot about you.
Well, yeah, I know. It's all going to prove to be untrue. It's all going to prove to be untrue. They're going to realise what a complete hoax. Sure.
Okay, great.
We can't post it up, can we? No. Okay. No, you see what I mean? But that's all.
Yeah.
I was on the audience, that's all. But anyway, that's great.
Yeah, okay, great.
Right.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 21st International Commercial Mediation Competition. We are so thrilled all of you could join us this morning, and thrilled for all of you to be cheering on our two competing teams, the University of Auckland and Bucerius Law School. Mediating today, we have Bill Wood, and on our panel of judges, we have Alan Roy, Tat Lim, Layla Porter-Love, Mary McLean, and Anisha Boujon. All right. I want to just say once again, thank you to all of you for traveling all this way, for joining us, for all the professionals in the audience, for the volunteers in the audience, the teams. We could not have this without every one of you. And so now, let's turn it over to the session supervisor, Ansela.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Botru. I am your mediation session supervisor for this day. The mediation session will last, like every time, 85 minutes. I will hold up a 10-minute sign when there are 10 minutes left, and a 5-minute sign when there are 5 minutes left. I will make sure that you all see this. Does anyone have any questions before we start? You're good. You're familiar with the rules by now. Please note that the use of calculators and watches are allowed. Tablets and laptops are allowed for judges only to access the mediation competition platform. Accessing any other sources of electronic information is prohibited for everyone else in the room. Please turn off your mobile phones or put them in airplane mode so that both you will not get distracted and everyone else is having their full attention on you. And note that no advice, communication, or assistance is to occur between the coaches or non-competing team members and the competing teams. The time will go according to my clock. You have 1 hour and 25 minutes. I'm here for you. You may start.
Good morning. My name is Bill Wood. I'm a mediator from London, and it's my privilege to be mediating the dispute between Faye and Jan this morning. We'll do some introductions first, if we could just introduce ourselves.
Of course. Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Bill. My name is Faye. I am the owner of Cool Bags, the co-founder of Fab Cool, and I would like to confirm I do have complete authority to settle today.
Good morning, Bill. My name is Chloe, and I am Faye's in-house counsel today.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jan, and I am the owner of Fab Fashion.
Good morning from me as well. My name is Anna. I'm legal counsel of Jan.
Anna, thank you. I'm very happy to be called Bill. It sounds as if everybody else is prepared to work on first-name terms. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yes.
You need to know I speak extremely fast. So when I tell you that it's going to be important today that we make sure we understand each other and that we speak slowly and acknowledge that there may be people here whose first language is not English, I'm probably talking principally to myself as the one who needs that advice. There are ground rules that I think it's worth stating, though both teams are extremely well advised by their lawyers, and I'm sure this has already been covered. But under the terms of the ICC mediation agreement that you have signed, this is a strictly confidential process, so that all of us, all 5 of us, are required to keep private from the outside world everything that is said today and everything that's been written for the purposes of today. We're also talking without prejudice, which means something slightly different. It means that if we can have a negotiation today and people can make offers and refer to other people's offers and respond, those exchanges can take place without you worrying that somebody later is going to say you've made a concession of some kind. They can't do that. They can't refer at all to those negotiations because of the without prejudice principle. And the last thing I need to say about the ground rules is that if we do caucus, and I'm with one team on their own, I will treat all the information that team shares with me as confidential to that team unless I'm specifically authorized to communicate it to the other side. Okay. There are proceedings in the background here. Both sides have made claims in proceedings. And you are, of course, free when you leave here to pursue those proceedings and take them to court. You have, as I've said, got extremely good legal teams. It will be a superb trial if you want to have it. But clearly, you've signed a mediation agreement, so I'm going to make the assumption, and it's the only assumption I'm going to make this morning, I'm going to make the assumption that you're prepared to commit time and energy to considering whether there are alternatives to litigating out the issues between them. And that's the work really we're engaged in. The work we're engaged in is trying to make sure that you make good choices, you're able to make good choices against the widest possible perspective of the position. The cliche for mediators is that you act on your real interests, not necessarily on the narrow legal issues. Okay. I'll help you with questions, I'll help you possibly with suggestions, but this is your discussion. Sometimes I'm dealing with the chief executives of big companies, but here I'm dealing with two individuals, so I don't really need to ask you whether you've got authority, because Fei and Yan, this is your dispute. And if it's a settlement, it's going to be your settlement, okay? So let's begin the conversation. I think I'm talking to the requesting party first. Fei, if you'd like to say anything you want to.
Thank you, Bill. Yan, Anna, thank you for accepting my request for a mediation today. I am genuinely heartened that we can have this discussion today, and I look forward to it being an open and unprejudiced one, as you said, Bill. Yan, our partnership was something special. Fab Cool captured the hearts around the world through iconic brands like My Sweetie and Cloudy, brands celebrated for their elegance, their craftsmanship, and their quality construction. We were so successful, Yan. And looking back, I think our success came from the fact that we were so different. You were the pragmatist, Yan. You took my designs and turned them into a multinational reality. With your accounting expertise and the distribution engine to match, you scaled this venture into a thriving business. And then there was me, the artist. For 20 years, I have poured myself into this craft. Every stitch, every curve, every fabric and weave mattered to me. I was obsessive about quality because that was the work. And in hindsight, I can see that tension between us, between vision and pragmatism, it wasn't a weakness. It was the very engine of our success. But to be honest, this balance has been broken for quite some time now. As sales dipped, I began to feel unheard. Instead of innovating together, the response was pressure to cut costs, cheaper materials, compromised standards. To me, this wasn't just a business decision. It felt like a rejection of my life's work. But then it went even further. Yan, you accused me of artificially inflating costs, of trying to drain the joint venture for my own gain. Hearing that you believed this so deeply that you hired independent auditors was deeply painful, and in my anger and in my hurt, I couldn't bring myself to sign the audit accounts that followed. What I never expected was what came next. To my shock, you sued me for breach of director's duties and petitioned to wind up this dream that we built together. But worst of all, I discovered that you sent private investigators to stalk my personal life in Patagonia, trying to collect evidence to support suspicions that had no foundation. Jan, that crossed a line, and it absolutely destroyed the last shred of trust and loyalty that I had left. In that moment of utter betrayal, I truly believed I could never work with you again. My heart has been telling me to walk away, to take my precious brands, my creations with me, and to leave this pain behind. And yet, despite everything, I am here because I still believe there may be a way to salvage the dream that we built together. We are standing at a fork in the road, Jan. One path is separation. If, despite our very best efforts today, that is where we end up, then so be it. But that path is no longer about shared growth or shared success. It becomes about dismantling, allocating value rather than creating it, deciding who takes what. And I must be clear, Jan, if you take the brands alone, you lose the artistry and the manufacturing excellence that's required to turn them into reality, the skills that truly bring them to life. But there is another path, the path of partnership. That path requires honest communication and openness, as you mentioned, Bill. It requires us to confront fears that are not grounded in reality, like accusations of me draining the company. It requires us to openly address our different approaches to quality and to cost, not as enemies, but as partners who once knew how to balance that tension. If we can restore that balance between your pragmatism and my artistry, then I believe Fab Cool can reach new heights once again. My guiding interests for me in this conversation are the following. First, value protection. Maximizing our shared success if we choose to stay, or ensuring that my contributions are fully realized should we move towards a buyout. Second, artistic legacy. Maintaining total creative control over My Sweetie and Cloudy to ensure that they remain the untarnished embodiment of my artistry. And lastly, operational stability. That looks like managing any solution we reach today to ensure that whether we stay or separate, day-to-day operations can continue until the situation is stabilized. We stand at a fork in the road. I'm asking that we at least try the path less traveled, the path of partnership. Thank you, and with that, I'd like to hand over to Chloe to speak more to our legal standing.
Jan, Faye, I am encouraged that you are both here today at the table. It's a positive starting point for resolving what has clearly become a difficult and deeply personal commercial dispute. Faye has just spoken to the long and productive history of the joint venture. I have advised my client that mediation provides the confidential and efficient forum to properly surface interests, address mistrust, because we are here without prejudice, and explore outcomes that litigation simply cannot deliver. I am here today to work alongside Bill and Anna to help guide this process and help us develop this wider perspective of our dispute. Above all else, I am here to advocate for and protect Faye's interests. Jan, I do need to be clear about the legal landscape against which this mediation is taking place. If this dispute does not resolve today, the parties remain on a litigation track involving allegations of breach of director's duties, a petition for just and equitable winding up, and competing applications for a compulsory buyout. Faye is prepared to defend these proceedings. However, I understand both parties have been advised that court proceedings in Lemania are slow, costly, and highly disruptive. During that period, the joint venture remains in a functional deadlock. That deadlock has real and immediate consequences. Strategic decisions cannot be made, including decisions around product direction, investment, and brand stewardship. Operational trust would continue to deteriorate, making day-to-day governance increasingly difficult. And critically, the value of FabCool's most important assets, its brands and associated IP, is exposed to ongoing risk through the dilution of creative vision. Litigation may eventually impose an outcome, but it does so slowly, publicly, and without preserving value. It also removes from both parties any meaningful control over timing, structure, or commercial nuance. And what a court cannot do, what no order can compel, is ongoing artistic contribution, design vision, or creative partnership. While the path to litigation exists, it is not the path that my client prefers today. Mediation offers something fundamentally different: the ability to move efficiently, privately, flexibly, and to design an outcome that reflects this commercial reality rather than legal default positions. As Faye has already noted, the parties are at a fork in the road. We suggest that today's agenda is structured to include that reality directly and honestly. Firstly, we propose to discuss operational difference, to confirm whether sufficient trust, governance structure, and clarity can be restored for the parties to continue together somehow, or whether separation is the only realistic and responsible outcome today. Second, value maximization. Recognizing that this discussion will necessarily look very different depending on the path that the parties feel they should explore. If the parties determine that separation is required, value maximization focuses on how each party exits with a viable future without unnecessary destruction of goodwill or brand value. If, however, there is scope for trust to be rebuilt, value maximization shifts toward reimagining the joint venture, restoring confidence, and protecting long-term value. Faye comes to this table prepared to engage constructively with both possibilities. There is no predetermined outcome to being imposed today. There is, however, a genuine intention to test whether resolution can be reached, and to do so with commercial discipline and good faith. Thank you, Bill. I'll pass back to you.
Chloe, thank you. Jan.
Thank you very much, Faye and Chloe, for these kind first words. I also want to thank you, Bill, for mediating the session today, and I think helping us find a mutually beneficial solution. Faye, I really appreciate your invitation as a sign to find a constructive and collaborative agreement. I've just heard from you that you have been troubled that the tension that once was the engine, as you said, has somehow turned into a weakness in our collaboration. You said high standards are really important to you because they reflect your craftsmanship, and what your life's work is about is that artistry that is so much empowering and part of your personality as an artist. What I gather from you is that you seek to achieve an open and unprejudiced solution and to explore options to salvage the dream that we've built, and I'm happy that we're sitting here to find such a solution. Especially after the last 3 years, I appreciate that insight in your perspective, and I respect your thoughts on the matter. To be honest, before we received that invitation, I had but 3 possible options in mind. Objectively, there is, number 1, we wind up Fab Cool altogether. Number 2, I achieve a buyout of your shareholdings. And number 3, you buy out my shares. Now that you have invited us to a more constructive approach, the palette of solutions has become a lot more powerful. A lot more colorful, of course. However, before we spoil the painting, I think we need to talk about what actually brought us here. And after you've just talked about the lines that were crossed, that shredded any trust, and so basically any trust was left, I am convinced there's a mutual need for conversation. I agree with you that since 2019, Fab Cool has been on a roller coaster of success. With great speed, we were reaching skyrocketing numbers. After only 4 years, we made a revenue of almost $1 billion. However, today, we're past the pinnacle of our relationship. Not only our numbers are on the downfall, but the very foundation of our collaboration. Our partnership is at an all-time low. I cannot forget how you belittled and humiliated me in front of our managing staff. I cannot oversee the little confidence you have in my abilities as a business partner, and I will not tolerate this disrespect toward me any longer after all I've personally put into this endeavor. However, there's one convincing reason I want to note to attend this mediation today, and that is the responsibility I feel for our staff. The number of people who rely on us has increased from 10 to 80. 80 people whose jobs depend on us. Coming from a family business background, I promised myself, I will not leave this room today if these people were to end up on the streets. So let us use this meeting as an opportunity to find an agreement that reflects the past, the present, and a reasonable future. In order to help you understand our perspective, my lawyer Anna will now explain our legal standing on the matter.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Faye and Chloe, for sharing your perspectives first. From your opening remarks, I gather that we share the common goal that everyone's views are fully understood. So this is a great starting point. Given the fact that English is not our native language, I also want to note at the very beginning that you please feel free to ask questions at any time if anything we say is unclear. Like you, we are confident that Bill can guide us in this session and lead us to a mutually beneficial resolution to this dispute. Before addressing the legal aspects of this case, I want to acknowledge, like you did, that the joint venture has been very successful. It was a long and productive collaboration, and even though there was this difference between you and my client, the craftsmanship on the one hand and the pragmatism on the other, this collaboration has worked for a long time. But now that profits have turned into debts and there was an imbalance created, as you have put it, we have to focus on the following 3 points that are important to my client. First, we would like to address what we considered a breach of your director duties. Second, we want to look at what the future of the joint venture could look like. And thirdly, we have to ensure that the employees' interests are considered in this mediation. Turning first to the director duties. I've heard from you that you were very sad and quite frankly shocked that Jan has called your duties and the way you handled the situation into question, and we can understand that. However, let me explain where this claim, where these even stem from. For Jan, the breach of duties were twofold. On the one hand, you sourced very excessive luxury materials. I've heard from you that this stems from your 20 years of craftsmanship that you have perfected, that you appreciate and that you really like those valuable materials. However, what is in principle an artistic choice has its limits where the joint venture cannot sustain itself financially. Because if that's the case, without this balance of your artistic freedom and Jan's pragmatism, we are not able to share the stream of sharing those bags with other people. So your decision to threaten those specific materials threatened the business model and ultimately led to the fact that Jan had to take on personal debts to sustain the stream. On the other hand, you refused to sign off the audited accounts of FabCool. I've gathered from your opening statement that this decision stemmed from anger and hurt. And on a personal level, I think we can see how this happened and we can understand that. However, to Jan, this looked like you did this in bad faith to undermine the venture's operability, and Jan interpreted this as a sign of an immense distrust to his abilities as accounts manager. Regarding the future of the joint venture, the basis for a joint venture is collaboration, and we both have established that this balance and collaboration has been shaken. And you also stated that you felt like you wanted to walk away. And my client has stated initially that she only saw 3 options, and I think that those were the options that we could only see before mediation. Now that we are in mediation, there is a possibility to move beyond those 3 options. And today we have to figure out what paths remain open. Lastly, with regard to the joint venture's employees. Growing up around the employees of Jan's family business, Jan has learned what responsibility for people's livelihoods actually means. And while the future of this joint venture is uncertain right now, it is important for Jan to gain clarity about what will happen to the employees. And I see that is an interest that you also share, since you stated that you want to make sure that day-to-day operations remain possible. So, having heard your opening remarks really made us, I think, hopeful that beyond the allegations, we can find a reasonable future for both parties. So, thank you, Bill, for supporting us in this process. And we look forward to working with you, Faye, and with you, Chloe. In that spirit, I would like to propose an agenda to ensure that we address all relevant aspects of this case. Firstly, because I heard this is important to you as well. I think we should find a common understanding of what led us here. You called that operational differences. To clarify that, I think that is a common point we could put up on the board later. Secondly, it's important for my client to address liabilities. You have talked about value maximization, and I think those 2 points tie together. We have to find out what are the economic possibilities to either wind up or to find out what we do with the shares. And lastly, we would like to explore what the future is in regards to the employees. And this is the last point I think we should also add on the agenda. Do you feel comfortable with this? Do you would like to add anything? Please feel free to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Anna. I've heard, in regards to your first point about a common understanding, and you mentioned earlier the breach of the director duties, I think that does come back to, as you also mentioned, the distrust in the room. So I think speaking about those operational differences first really gives us a chance to address this distrust, ask the questions we need for that. So I'm very happy with that being the first agenda point. Secondly, you've mentioned liabilities, we've mentioned value maximization. My understanding is that both of those are about the questions we need to ask to know what path we're going to take forward. So I'm happy with that as well. And perhaps as a sub-point of that, we would definitely address the employees that you've mentioned is important to you, Jan. It would be really helpful to myself and my client if we had that visualized. Would you agree?
Yes, totally.
Yes.
All right. Just to be clear, what I think we're doing is mapping out some areas of discussion. I think the parties agree that the important thing to do is to work out to some extent what has gone wrong before we try to fix it. I'm absolutely sure that's the right course. And operational differences is a broad heading and obviously has a number of subcategories because there are effectively a number of allegations that have been made across between the two tables. But if I put operational differences on the board for the moment, and then we just get some reactions to that and map a few things out, is that okay?
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
I'll do that. Is that okay? I'm happy to add further categories in due course, but when you talk about operational difficulties, just tell me what, first of all, you have in mind.
I think for us, it is really about clarifying where our paths crossed in the last, split in the last 3 years. I feel like there's some misunderstanding on where we want to go with this joint venture, and this led us to this conflict.
I understand that.
I agree. I think there are clearly some tensions that have arisen, and I have some concerns. I've heard from you, Jan, that you have some concerns as well, and I do feel it's important to address those before we can decide which of those future paths we take. I do also just want to take this opportunity to reflect on what I have heard from you, Jan. Thank you for being open. I'm really encouraged to hear that you are here in the spirit of collaboration, and you came in here with those 3 potential paths forward, but to hear that you are open to seeing if there's a possibility of a 4th with us is quite heartening in today's discussion. I do also note you said you felt belittled and humiliated in front of the staff, and that stood out to me, and I just want to take this opportunity first to apologize if my actions or my words made you feel that way. I think I explained myself, and Anna, I heard you reflect as well that it did come from a place of anger and shock at the allegations, so I would like that out there, and I hope that we do get to discuss it a bit more today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the apology, and I think this is a step forward, and I'm happy to discuss why we're sitting here apologizing. I think this is something that really needs some further conversation. Thank you.
So moving forward into this first agenda point, it would be very helpful for my client if we could get an understanding of where this distrust comes from. What is the seed of this distrust?
For me, on a personal level, it is really about that I feel like you don't trust me as a business partner. When you sort of belittled me as an accountant clerk in front of our managing staff, I really thought that I've always considered you a partner of mine, and then you so suddenly turned your back on me. And I was just wondering, where does that sort of hatred even come from?
Jan, I can assure you it certainly was not a hatred. I'll be the first to admit I'm very passionate about my creations. All of these brands are not just bags to me, they're like my children. And because of my 20 years of craftsmanship, I think that brings itself to why I feel so passionate, and I said I was a little obsessive about the quality. I have appreciated your partnership for the last 3 years, and I think you have been the commercial engine behind all of this, and bringing the strategy to life. When I started seeing things go wrong, I think that the differences that I valued before, I started to see as perhaps an issue, and I thought that misalignment was something that couldn't be salvaged.
Faye, you were, with Jan, incredibly successful. You were a brilliant combination. You've said that yourself. $950 million worth of turnover is a lot of handbags, and you did a brilliant job.
Thank you.
What was the beginning of the problem? What was the beginning of the end of the golden years that you were enjoying at that point? Or is that a fair question? I mean,
Absolutely, Bill. I think, my sweetie and Cloudy were so incredibly successful, and the business was doing incredibly well. 950 million, who wouldn't be incredibly happy with that? When things started to go differently and we started seeing drops in sales with other brands, I previously, from the successes of those initial brands, I thought that I could trust your strategy and to maximize that value. That is, one of my interests here today. But when I started seeing sales dropping, I thought that maybe we didn't align on those values anymore, and perhaps I was more, focused on maximizing that value and getting that success, while Jan, you were a little too focused on the financials. And I understand the importance of focusing on that. I would not have been able to have the success without you being that driver behind that. But
Jan, do you remember that moment of the beginning of a decline? And
I remember vividly that moment of the decline. It was just after the pandemic hit, and yes, I remember that we started to struggle, but I also remember my attempts to address the issue of my lack of experience with so many brands, with so many new marketing strategies and markets to explore, were responded by you with impatience, and then you humiliated me in front of the managing staff. At this time where I actually needed my partner more than ever, you turned your back on me. Help me understand that, please.
Yeah, and I did say I apologize for my words and my actions. They were, they came from a place of anger and hurt, and I guess vulnerability at seeing my creations perhaps not flourish in the way that I thought they would. Jan, what else can I say to make you feel better? I'm hearing that this is a concern, and I note you were belittled and humiliated. How can I regain that trust from you?
I accept your apology, and I don't want to press on this humiliating moment any longer. However, you mentioned anger as well. Maybe in order to understand the apology, please help me where your anger actually stems from. Where is it that you saw the starting point? Because of the decline of our joint venture, for me it was the financial. Where exactly did it start to burden you?
Yeah, and so the decline was deeply upsetting for me. I think where the anger more so started is when I found out that you were privately investigating me. So can you tell me a little more about why that decision was made?
Yes, I understand that you were shocked, I think, about the private investigation. To me, how this conflict sort of escalated was when you started producing at a very high cost. I felt like you were risking the profitability of both of us. I personally, I would not source very expensive material, risk the profitability of my own business, and then even incur personal liabilities, personal debt, as you said. So I kept wondering, what is it about that material that you would take such financial risks? Was there even a financial risk you took? I really didn't trust you in that. I'm sorry to say it.
So just to clarify, the private investigations were looking into the source of the materials?
I'm sorry, this is a misunderstanding. The private investigation were into the personal debt, because I didn't understand why you would keep sourcing these expensive materials when you were at the same time incurring personal liabilities.
Maybe to clarify, we have to see how this whole situation came to be. The pandemic hit, and this led to reduced communication. Jan was trying, there were those bi-monthly meetings where you two were sitting together and trying to find a way to collaborate. Then suddenly, the communication cut off. There was a difficulty for my client, and that is one point that my client is trying to look into how that happened. In that scope, then you decided to source increasingly expensive material. And you've mentioned before that previously there was a balance between the creativity you provided and the business insight that Jan had. So when communication cut off and you sourced material where Jan believed that was not sustainable, Jan was wondering why you were doing that. And this lack of communication, that sort of fostered that mistrust. And when Jan was not able to get a hold of you, that's when Jan kind of desperately tried to find information how this came to be. So that is the context we're finding ourselves in.
Okay, I understand, Jan, and I can imagine this stems from, your interest of responsibility towards not only the business but the employees, and a desire to see it not only succeed but survive what I'm sure you saw as difficult times. I would like to clarify, prices were not increasing. This all goes to my value protection and my artistic legacy. The fabric, the materials, the stitches, everything I use goes to the very heart and soul of the brand and the quality. I've talked about the importance of the quality and the craftsmanship of the bags. That has always been important to me. You say that I haven't taken on any personal debt, but as a result of FabCool being unable to pay for these supplies anymore, I have taken out personal IOUs with suppliers, which, is it safe? Should I tell them, Chloe? I'm really worried at the moment because these suppliers could come and ask for these debts back at any moment. And this dispute, the uncertainty that I'm facing at the moment, threatens that even more, and I think puts me and puts FabCool in quite a vulnerable position.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and I understand your concerns now a lot better. I've heard from you just that what really is integral to you is that craftsmanship, that artistry, that is the very foundation sort of the brands that we established. So maybe help me understand where exactly, if the sky was the limit, where exactly do you see these brands in the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself as an artist? What would be an ideal?
Do you want to take some time? My client would like to answer that question fully. It's quite a large question, our future strategic vision. I think it could be helpful if we had a private discussion with Bill first, so then we could come back and fully answer that question for you with most transparency. If we could have a caucus, please, Bill. Thank you.
Fine. Yes, we'll do that. Yes, hi.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Chloe, for calling that. Thank you, Bill. Jan has, of course, asked me about where I see the business going, and I anticipate this line of questioning will begin to touch on my future vision for Fab Cool and how I see that we can maximize value. I have some information, but I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to share it with Jan at this stage.
Okay.
I have engaged with business strategists to discuss the future of Fab Cool, and I don't want to lie to Jan, so I would like to discuss it with you first and I guess reality test the idea a bit. The reason I don't feel quite ready to share it with Jan is because I still don't know what the future of our relationship is going to look like.
Sure.
The business strategists have told me that with some strategy changes, we can really turn the business around and start maximizing value in the next 3 years. On the one hand, a resolution that we reach today, it could meet my interests for Jan to see this potential for long-term value increase. So I would want to tell it to her. On the other hand, if we do end up going our separate ways today and I end up buying Jan out, I don't think it's in my best interest to tell her about this potential for the value to increase.
Because it'll affect the price.
Absolutely.
I understand.
Or even worse, if Jan knows about it, then it could be the other way around and she might decide to hold out and use it for her own good later on.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, work with you and Chloe to think about when I should best disclose this to Jan. Do I risk being the first mover and maybe weakening my position? Or if I risk waiting too long, I think it's a valuable piece of information that could get missed.
Chloe, what would you think about advising Faye to indicate that it's a discussion for the future, that there are some private thoughts that she's had, but they're not particularly fully formed at the moment, but that there are possibilities for growth, and not actually commit to disclosing a structured proposal? I mean, that seems to me you get the benefit for the purpose of energizing the negotiation we're having without actually giving up the negotiation position, which I see as a real issue for you. But those would be my initial thoughts.
No, thank you, Bill. I think that's helpful. I think this stems from the fact that coming here today, we didn't know if the relationship was going to be over, and if the relationship is going to be over, then we don't know what that will look like.
Understand.
I think you're right. That's good advice, that if we discuss that we have opportunities for future growth, that could really streamline us to maybe getting to that point of, do we want to take that path? Do we still trust each other? We've heard from them the mistrust. It developed from the sourcing of materials. Perhaps we need to clarify.
I think those were good exchanges. I think we may be near the end of those exchanges. We might be beginning to talk about brand value in various ways, but that's your sense too?
I think so, Bill. I think I've tried to address Jan's concerns about, where the sources of that mistrust lie. I do have a few more concerns about, how I see Jan's business strategy going.
Sure.
So I might have a few more questions about that, but I agree with Chloe. I still don't know, without getting those answers, where this will go in the next, I suppose, hour.
I think it would be a fair and truthful answer to say, this is a discussion you and I need to have if we go forward together. There are all sorts of possibilities. Some of them are quite promising, but we're going to need it. That's not really, you're not going to write out a strategy today and agree it.
No.
We've got a more general problem to solve. Okay.
So then maybe once you, Faye, ask your further clarification, we jump to that point of really addressing, which path are we taking? And then that can dedicate how we spend the rest of this mediation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea. Bill, how...
Do you want, when they come back in again, how do you want to play that? Shall I say that you'd now like to give some answers to the question Jan asked when we last worked together? Something like that?
Yeah, I think if you can make some space for me to,
Okay, I'll
talk
do
to
that.
Jan about that. Thank you.
Jan, hi, thank you for that. I think you posed a question when you were last in the room, and I think Faye was going to give some responses to that.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jan and Anna, for giving us that time. Jan, you wanted to know what my vision is for the future of FabCool and where I see, the value maximization coming from. Those are things that I have thought about, and I do feel hopeful for the future, but it does still depend on whether we will be able to address the concerns that both of us have. And I hope that in answering your questions, I have been able to clarify where your sources of mistrust have come from and assure you that I was in this as a real partner. Before I can talk about exactly what I would like to do for the future, because I think that's also a conversation that we should be having together, I do have some more questions about my concerns in what has gone in the last few years. So if it's all right with you, I would like to ask you a couple more questions.
Of course.
Thank you. So the legitimate concerns that remain, which I think stem from the different attitudes that we may have taken regarding cost versus quality and the value that we placed on those respective factors. What do you think are the main issues that you have regarding the current business strategy?
For me, it is really that the financial setbacks we experienced troubled me. There were soaring production costs with a sort of unsustainable marketing budget. There were huge endorsement fees for celebrity product ambassadors, and some of the design turned out to be less popular than we had anticipated. So I do acknowledge my marketing mistakes and my misjudgment in the past. So maybe given that for me it was the financial setbacks, I think for you the marketing aspect might be more important. So do you see any future with us with respect to my lack of experience in that regard that I do acknowledge?
Thank you for that openness and acknowledging, I suppose, a lack of experience. I too have a lack of experience when it comes to maybe the commercial side or the accounting side of this. You mentioned that the concerns are financial. They stem from financial setbacks as well as marketing. Do you have any numbers that you're able to give me regarding those concerns?
Yes, I think we have seen we've missed the target of the mini tote by 40%, and I do acknowledge that not replacing that product was a marketing mistake I made, and I sincerely apologize for that. In hindsight, it was a mistake that I didn't anticipate. However, we've missed a sales target, and that really troubled us. These are the numbers I can give.
Right, so you're referring to the drop in sales we saw for the Magic Tote.
Sorry.
And no, that's okay. And when I suggested that we replace it with the Mini Cute bag, and that suggestion, I suppose, was rejected. But thank you for acknowledging that. You also mentioned the marketing side. Do you think that those marketing concerns or financial concerns could be mitigated in the future if we do, if we reduced costs in the marketing areas, perhaps? I know you've worked on some celebrity campaigns in the past. Can you speak to the success of those, perhaps?
So you're wondering whether our financial setbacks might be mitigated if we just reduced costs in terms of celebrity product ambassadors. I have not looked into the numbers of that. I think any mitigation of costs might be helpful looking in the future. What I'm wondering is just whether you actually trust in my abilities to come up with the right marketing strategies. What I've understood so far is that this is really important to you, the marketing of the artistry in these brands, and I think my pragmatism, as you put it, might not be fit to your needs in that sense.
I think on the issue of moving forward, we should discuss how we want to move forward and the path we'll take. I'll summarize where we are now because we have covered a lot. I think it's very positive that we've discussed the mistrust, we discussed the private investigation, and that you wanted to know what the debts were being incurred on both sides for the sourcing of the goods, the materials, and the costs. We've talked about that my client has creative and exciting opportunities in the future for growth, but to discuss that together will really depend on what path we take moving forward. Additionally, we've acknowledged that the main issue between you two is your difference in vision and strategy. I think there was some promising discussion that you were very transparent and kind, Jan, that there have been some marketing mistakes and there does need to be learning there in the future. What you two represent, I think, are two talents on each side of the spectrum. We have Jan with the accounts and the financials, and Faye with the creativity and the craftsmanship. And if you wanted to explore this partnership going forward, I see a lot of value in perhaps having a balanced third party coming in and balancing those two sides of the spectrum to really protect your value and build your operational stability.
I agree. I think maybe that's even an option that we can note down for later, Bill or Chloe. Jan, you asked specifically about the trust and moving forward in the future and whether I do see a possibility in trusting you again. I think that your transparency and your openness and admitting where things went wrong and apologizing as well has gone a long way in that. So perhaps with this significant trust behind us and the respective concerns resolved, I would say, in the time that we have left today, do you think it would be more valuable to prioritize exploring moving forwards towards a continued partnership or still going our separate ways?
Yes, I think there has been a lot of information. I've heard about third parties coming in, and I think there are a lot of options to explore. There's just one thing that I think needs further discussion, and this is, I appreciate very much that you're so confident in my abilities as an accountant. However, there are some, you didn't sign off the finance statements that we made this year, the accountant words? Yeah. Maybe can we clarify why that happened before we move on?
Just to clarify, we have heard from you in the beginning that this has happened because you were angered and there were a lot of feelings involved, so you didn't sign. What client is now trying to figure out, is there any other reason beyond those feelings that were involved that would hold you back now to sign off those statements? And I've also heard you talk about that you were shocked that we involved a third party, the auditor. So 2 questions. Is there anything holding you back? And what is your concern regarding the auditor?
If we just break that down one at a time.
Thank you. That was a few questions in one. Yes, you're right. The reason I did not sign was because I was angered. I had just found out about the private investigation and I was hurt and I felt betrayed, and that is why I did not sign them. There was no other reasoning or intention behind that or concerns. Chloe, what
Can I just make a point? I think this has been a really useful exchange. There's probably a further question to answer about the accounts, but I think you've indicated the main point. Eventually, the mediation centre where we're sitting will be closing for the night, so there are some time constraints upon us. We can meet again in due course, in early course, I suggest, if we don't complete our discussions tonight. But I just want to get as far as we can. And I want to ask you one question, which is that Chloe at the beginning pointed out the damage that we've done to the brands by the disruption of this litigation, which would take some time. Do you remember her making that point? Does that accord with your views on your side and your advice to your client as well?
Yes, similarly to the other party, my client is also worried about lengthy proceedings. So I think this is a common interest that my client and Faye share. We do not want to proceed in court. We would like to find an amicable solution here. However, unless those very important interests are met, for example, like the employees, then we might consider litigation. But I think we all favor a solution here today instead of going to court.
Well, is it time to put some headings on the board relating to outcomes and course we take from here on?
I think we're at that fork in the road now. So I'll put my question again, Jan. Bill, you mentioned we don't have much time left today, and while I acknowledge we may not reach a final agreement, I would like to use what time we have left efficiently. So, Jan, at this stage, do you feel it's better to prioritize discussing a potential path forward together or separately?
This is a very broad question that you put here, but I feel like with what we have established so far, there's a lot of trust that is sort of rebuilt. And I think what we agree on is that a lack of communication is really what troubled this relationship a lot. Given that we're on the two sides of the spectrum, you've mentioned a third party that might work as a facilitator in that communication. So maybe we explore that as an option looking forward together, because I do not see us as the two of us collaborating, to be honest.
That's good to hear, Jan, thank you. And I have noted that as an option to discuss later. But perhaps then if we're looking towards the questions needing to be asked, should we separate? Should Faye buy out your shareholding, just to gather some sense of what would go forward? What would you need for an amicable separation?
If Faye was to buy out my shareholdings, I would love to at least get the licenses for My Sweetie and for Cloudy, so I can keep distributing these, as these have been the most valuable brands that we've established together.
Mm-hmm. And then on the alternative, should you buy out Faye's shareholding, what value do the brands, you've mentioned 2 of them, My Sweetie and Cloudy, in addition to 10 others, what value do these brands share to you?
Likewise, I think for me it is most important of sorts to keep a sort of hold on these valuable brands.
And is holding on to those valuable brands, you've mentioned their value a couple of times, is that more about the profit that you derive from them, or wanting to, is it something more meaningful? Because from my perspective, My Sweetie and Cloudy represent that artistic legacy that I'm talking about and what I'm trying to protect here today.
I think we can agree that you're the artistic head of this joint venture, and these brands just have been the most popular with our customers. So far, I have no other artist on hand who could provide me with likewise successful brands, so I would need these brands to remain in business also.
And what I'm also hearing from you is, because your interest is predominantly financial, you would also be, should we separate, you would be interested in finding a way to still maintain a manufacturing relationship, potentially, even though the joint venture itself may separate.
I've not thought about this option concretely, but this sounds reasonable. So, however, right now I cannot see how this would alter a relationship.
Sorry, I'll clarify. I heard from you then that the reason you wanted the 2 licenses to My Sweetie and Cloudy was for their value, and that you don't have other designers to give you more value. So that's something of interest, that looking forward you would need a pathway for more value add, more value creation.
Yes, or I was actually hoping for a sort of license that I could keep distributing as sort of my exclusive right, these 2 brands, so you would retain the trademarks, but I could keep distributing them in the market, in my market.
So maybe to summarize, we have talked about either of the parties buying out the shares of the other, and we've talked about a possible future collaboration. What we've also established is that the way the collaboration has worked, with you being on the opposite ends of the spectrum, we would need a third party. So I think if we continue to explore that option of a future collaboration in this joint venture with the 2 parties present, we would need a third party. Regarding the other 2 options, what I've heard is that if you were to buy out the shares of my client, there of course needs to be some compensation for those shares. So how does that compensation look like? My client is open to discuss. If we do it the other way around, that my client is to buy out your shares, we would also need to figure out a way of compensation and what you would like to keep, since you have also mentioned that you would like to be creatively connected to your bags.
Okay, deep breath. Let's all take a deep breath, because we've quite quickly and quite suddenly gone into quite specific bargaining. And you've done that, no doubt, in response to my urging to get on with it and get out before they close the lights. I think what the solution would need to be to the process from now on is that you should end up, each of you, with a sufficiently clear idea of option 1 and option 2 to make a choice between them, or indeed to choose option 3, which is to do neither and carry on and litigate. So option 1 is that you improve and redesign the joint venture company. Option 2 is that you take over completely, one of you takes over completely the joint venture company, presumably paying some compensation. And you're beginning to map that out. Now, is that the kind of landscape you now want to explore, those two choices?
Precisely, Bill, and I think they are two very difficult landscapes and difficult choices. Anna, you did a great job of, summing up their complexities. I think regardless of which path we take, there will be several things to discuss, so perhaps some discussion about how we can navigate that. Chloe, if we do decide to part ways, thank you, Bill, there are, of course, a lot of factors that would need to be discussed. I mentioned in my opening, it's...
Sure. I think you've got 2, Chloe. Have you got 2?
Yes.
I'm the least important person. You have that.
Well, we do have a lot of factors making up the joint venture that would need to be discussed. Of course, I think these are all things that we need to touch on in the discussion. If it's a situation of splitting up, perhaps using this to look at what we need to address, who takes what. Alternatively, if we are going to continue together, we've mentioned there is a tension, and we are on 2 ends of the spectrum, and I think that there will need to be significant changes in how the joint venture is managed. So perhaps this is also a way then to look at the different factors of that relationship and how we can alter each one to make it more successful and to really protect the value of the brand and ensure that the operational stability that I'm looking for, and of course make sure that your responsibility, our shared responsibility to the joint venture and to the employees is protected as well.
Okay, thank you for the clarifying handout. So what I've heard from you is a lot of options that we very quickly explored. However, right now I have not fully understood right now what you would prefer actually. Are you looking into options to separate? You've asked many questions about that and what I would sort of prefer in these times, but what is it actually that you would prefer? You mentioned a third party coming in as an option to keep collaborating. What, however, is it that you want to separate or keep working together?
I think at the end of the day, I mentioned the bags represent my children. I'm not willing to completely walk away from them. I understand that, Jan, you see the value in Cloudy and My Sweetie, but those are not brands I'm simply willing to give up. I do have an interest in retaining them and protecting their value and the artistic legacy, my artistic legacy that I think lies directly with them. Perhaps I'm thinking out loud, perhaps at this stage, if that's something that we do see eye to eye on, the value of those brands and the additional brands, of course, maybe exploring a way that we can continue this together and collaborate, but not forgetting that there will need to be significant changes. Clearly, some things have not worked in the past, and we need to explore how we can change those to ensure they work in the future.
So my suggestion would be that you look at the possibility of improving the joint venture company and making some changes to it, under no obligation to then do that deal, under no obligation to then take that course, but you can look at it knowing that you have the alternatives of the more radical separation if you want it. Now, that would be a recommendation from me. Jan, you could take it forward however you wish.
I appreciate that faith in our collaboration. However, I think what we've seen in the past is just that the two of us cannot really work together, just the two of us. You've mentioned that third party? And I'm sorry I'm coming back to it so often, but is there someone you do have in mind, or at least some quality that you think we together lack that someone else could provide?
There's 2 points to that, Jan, and I'll answer for transparency, and then perhaps it would be time to bounce options against each other to really iron out those details. In regards to the third party, there isn't someone pre-selected. As we said, there's no pre-planned plans coming here today because we really needed to explore the relationship between both of us. However, we brought that up to ask you if you would feel comfortable walking away from that strategy role. And we acknowledge that you have a financial role, Faye has a creative role, and if that strategy role could perhaps be passed to someone else. We've gathered your response to that, which is very helpful, and again, we can discuss in options. Additionally, in regards to how that third party would be judged by quality, we think an objective criteria of when we're sourcing this person, they have a blind questionnaire that really, when they're filling it out, it makes clear that we have these 2 priorities in artistic legacy, craftsmanship, and commercial sustainability, so that they see all of that, and we can really assess them objectively and see how they balance between these interests. We wouldn't want to get someone who's biased to one side too, because then we won't be balancing the spectrum between us.
Yes, I think this sounds like an actually very forward-looking plan, and I think this is an idea I do feel comfortable with. However, there's one issue that just comes to my mind when I'm mapping out this as a concrete option, because I feel like what we were really lacking in our relationship in the past 3 years, and I know the pandemic hit and this is something we could not influence, however, we lacked communication. So maybe we also need to get into how we make sure that if there is even a third party coming in, we have this very intense and neat network of communication. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's another great option. I think we should get into tossing some options towards each other in a ping-pong type style. And just to clarify before we do that, Faye has one more point on the numbers, which will then inform options that we can put on the table shortly after.
Thank you, Chloe. Jan, I'm aware you've talked about having to take out a personal debt. My knowledge is that the number that was given to me was 15 million. Are you able to disclose any more information around that? Maybe clarification on the amount and also when it might be due?
Yes, so I think we're comfortable enough now after the many apologies. Actually, I've had to mortgage my house, and I took on bank debts in the height of $15 million to keep this joint venture afloat, because I really believed in this as something looking forward. And this is really something that I need to get, well, that really concerns me.
Right, and was that full, first needing to mortgage your house, I'm surprised to hear that, but thank you for your openness, and I'm sorry that it did need to come to that. This $15 million figure, perhaps, did this all go towards the joint venture? Can you give me a breakdown of how that was used?
It was, so when you were starting to source these expensive materials, we could not cover the cost of that, the production cost. They sort of inflated the price on these imports from Patagonia, and that was burdening sort of FabCool with that. And since I really believed in this, I guess it was my pragmatism that made me mortgage my house just to keep going with this joint venture.
Right, and just the final question, when is that loan due back to the bank? Do you have that information with you?
I'm sorry, I cannot give you this information.
Okay.
Well, in that case,
I think there are some things that we should bank here in the sense of elements of a proposed ongoing structure. Is it worth just putting neutral third party and improved communications on the board, which I've heard?
thank you.
I think, Faye, you sound as if you're beginning to tackle these financial claims, and I'm happy for you to do that. But just while you're pursuing that, let me just put those items up on this board.
Thank you, Bill. I think that will be really helpful to have those potential options up there for us. Faye, Jan, you mentioned, concerns about the communication lapsing and needing to put something in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. Do you have any ideas on how we can ensure that the communications don't lapse again in the future?
I think as long as we were meeting regularly and really focusing on a joint strategy, everything was going well. The issue sort of occurred when we were separated, also in terms of also location-wise, and we were not able to meet regularly. I think with so different people as we are, which can be the engine of this joint venture, as you mentioned at the very beginning, maybe we just need to make sure that we understand each other. I know that you were very concerned about your health. However, I didn't really understand the scope. So maybe we can get into how we make sure that we, also on a personal level, we communicate in a way that everyone feels comfortable with, but that really all matters are on the table.
Thank you, Jan, and I understand that, and I think that we probably share that interest in having probably what we can call a commitment to communication moving forward. And I mean, if we have this option of a third party as well, I'm sure the entire structure will look different. So that's something that we can iron out and make sure we are on the same page for. Jan, do you have any more concerns about the potential for moving forward that you would like to clarify, or do you think that it would be a good time to maybe move on and start exploring what it would actually look like?
Let me cut in first before we move forward. The reason why my client asked about your health, I know this is a very sensitive issue, very personal, was we have talked about that we want to improve communication. And my client was trying to figure out whether the reason behind the lack of communication during or after the pandemic was purely because of health concerns, or whether there was another underlying reason that is not here anymore.
I understand that, Anna, and I think having that shared commitment to communication going forward would probably go a long way if you have that certainty that there was nothing else, I guess, looming and causing that. It was, a very difficult time, the pandemic in Lamania, and I was concerned about having to travel to, I guess, infectious zones. So that is why I stopped the visits, but we were able to continue online for a while. I'm of the opinion that it's quite difficult online. I think we're very privileged even here today being able to be in the same room across the table from each other. I think the quality of the conversation and the communication is really enhanced when that does happen. So when we did have to go online, it was difficult to manage, and different time zones were also difficult, but there was nothing else that was making me not want to communicate with you.
Thank you for saying that. I think this really helps my client. In the interest of moving forward, and because we have talked about a third party a lot, please help me to understand what the role is my client will play in that regard. We have talked about what a possible third party could do, but what is the remaining role of my client in that option?
I think that depends on, both my strengths and Jan's strengths, and really thinking how we can maximize those while not perhaps overbearing one or the other with areas of the joint venture that go beyond our strengths. Perhaps that goes a bit more towards, Jan, where do you think your strengths would lie with the joint venture? What sort of involvement would you want to have?
I think the distribution and establishing this and expanding the retail network is something I can help with, and where I can contribute to my very best, as well as the numbers. However, I think we all know by now that marketing is not really my strong suit. And I guess this is exactly the position that we needed to fill with another person. Do you agree?
I think that's a great idea, and I think my strengths, of course, lie in the creative input, and if you're comfortable managing the distribution networks, that's of course what your family business started out as before we even met long ago. Maybe having that third neutral party that can balance both of those and think about the marketing, which I acknowledge you admit is not one of your strengths, but making sure that they think about marketing with regards to the specific distribution networks that you will provide and the numbers and what we need to reach there, and also maximizing that marketing for the specific designs and artistic legacy that I'm trying to protect.
I think this sounds like a good option. Maybe even a person who could facilitate communications where we, do not speak each other, just thinking out loud here. However, since we're looking into options for the future and giving the little time remaining, we do have depths that somehow need to be covered. So maybe we focus on this one point, because I've heard from you that this is really a pressing matter, since you've said that it is really, that time is of essence in that regard.
Yeah, so I think you're wanting to know what we can do immediately about the debts that have been incurred by both of us at this stage as a result of the breakdown. As I've mentioned, I have, $10 million that will probably be recalled by the suppliers very soon. I'm aware you've acknowledged the $15 million mortgage you've had to take out on your house. I think in the spirit of collaboration and moving forward, perhaps if we can reach that amicable resolution today, that might be something that we can agree to waive. Chloe, do you think that's a good idea?
I'll put an option on the table, and we don't have to evaluate it, but just so that it's expressed. Should Yan sell their shares to Faye, then the business is currently valued at 50 million, yes. So 50% of that is 25 million. And should Yan sell 50% of their shares, what my client could do is pay off 15 million over a 2 to 4 year time period, and pay off the other 10 million of that 25 by assigning to Yan the licenses for all 10 minor brands within the joint venture.
So maybe, Bill, could you help us maybe note that down or clarify what the option the other party has presented right now is, and how do we arrive at that numbers?
So what I heard Chloe say was that envisioning a buyout of Jan's shares by Faye, recognizing a value of 25 million, that there would be, she would pay 25 million, 15 million of it over a period of years, and the remainder to be satisfied, the remaining 10 million to be satisfied by assigning to Yan what are called the minor brands. So that's what was proposed.
I do believe from the instant liquidity isn't necessarily in each of our interests. My understanding of mortgage payments is that they're scheduled, and so that could align with a scheduled payment over the next 2 to 4 years, perhaps.
So we would retain the licenses for the 10 minor brands to the 2 to 4 years. Well, I understand your need for the, you've mentioned that My Sweetie and Cloudy are your babies, but they are, or some like your children, but these are very integral for me to distribute them, because I've mentioned I'm not really a marketing expert, so these minor brands, I'm just afraid that they're not really that valuable for me. Given that it is only 2 to 4 years, maybe we agree to only the 2 years, but I would have an exclusive license for My Sweetie and Cloudy. Is this something we could agree on? And then I would sell my shares to Faye. Is this a possible option for 2 years?
Just to clarify the option you're proposing, so that would be selling your shares for the proposed scheduled payments that we said, but in addition, the option you're putting on the table is to have a license over My Sweetie and Cloudy for 2 years?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Would you like to propose another option?
Thank you. I think another option, of course, just if we're throwing them all out there, I am interested in protecting the artistic value and the legacy of my brand, so I would be interested in retaining the license to all of my children as I called them, and establishing what you would need to agree to give them all to me.
Excuse me, what was the ending of your...
Establishing what you would like, Jan, in exchange for me retaining all of the licenses.
So the discussion a moment ago was about the difference between you seemed to be about how you dealt with the 10 million gap between 25 million value of the 50% shareholding and the 15 million that could be paid in cash, but over time. There are two rival suggestions, but yours involved, as I understand it, a 2-year license over the two main brands. Faye, unacceptable to you? Is that the position? I think that by implication from what you just said, that's giving too much away. Is that right?
I think just, to clarify, that is, of course, an ideal option that I would like. I understand that, Jan, you do have an interest in retaining the value for My Sweetie and Cloudy. Of course, my concerns would be in the artistic legacy that is tied in with those bags, as I mentioned. So if we were to agree to some sort of exclusive licensing that you're looking for, I would like some distinction for the duration of that licensing, that it's something, a distinction between the original manufacturer of those bags and the licensed products, just to ensure that the integrity is protected.
I think this is something we can achieve. If this is merely about integrity, I think I would have no issue really making sure that people understand that you are the artist of these bags.
Just to clarify, I think my client's concern more so was that over the 2 years, if we were to evaluate this now, over the 2 years where you have a license to My Sweetie and Cloudy, it would be my client's artistic legacy concern, and how, as you've said, currently the sales and the marketing are not succeeding, and over those 2 years where you have the license to continue selling those bags, we wouldn't want their value to drop through continuing issues we have. But again, maybe within this, we bring in the third party that can provide assurance to my client that over those 2 years where you license the bags, their value will be protected, the operations will be stable when we split up roles, and then after the 2 years, my understanding is that you would assign them to my client fully.
Well, now this is very good, very constructive stuff. Of course, licenses could be filled with conditions about preserving brand value and so on. I just want to be clear, we're talking, are we, about an exchange here that happens instead of or with the introduction of a third party? I'm just for my purposes, I'm a little confused.
There would definitely need to be a third party if my client licenses the products to them, because at this stage now the sales and the marketing is not succeeding, so we would need a third party to keep that value.
I understand that, but Jan would have ceased to be a shareholder, wouldn't she, at that point?
Yes, so what I've gathered is that we're now exploring an option where you're getting Jan's shares, and in exchange we look to a license that covers the 10 million that's compensated for the license of those 10 bags. And the remaining 50 million is to be paid by some installment of sorts. This can be achieved, for example, this can be compensated for by making sure that my client has for 2 years the exclusive license to distribute those bags. And because you're concerned that the value of the bags will drop, that's where third party comes in. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, to preserve the artistic legacy and the value protection.
Additionally, because
Your time is up. Congratulations.
Congratulations to both teams for a wonderful job. Thank you to our mediator and our judges. At this time, we would like everyone to stay seated. There's a short video that will play in just a moment. And in the meantime, I'd like to ask our 5 judges to please gather your things and to follow Anzella to the scoring room, please.
That's very good. That was really fun.
So you may want to go and talk to Jodie, who's down there, who wrote the problem.
Oh my goodness.
Give her a hard time.
Yes. I would love to chat with her.
Ich finde, das hat Spaß gemacht. Wir können stolz darauf sein. Die anderen waren zwar gewonnen, aber das ist nicht schlimm. Ich glaube, die anderen haben gewonnen, aber das ist nicht schlimm.
Oh, I'm wrong. Maybe you can stay here. I don't know. Maybe, of course, it's the judges who have to retire. Yeah. I think the five of us in a photograph, don't you?
Yes.
It's
Can we
a
stand
global
there?
program
Let's
focused on international arbitration. The idea of this program is to provide with a very in-depth education on all kinds of dispute settlement applied in the international arena.
What sets the LLM apart from other comparable degrees has to be two main elements. One, it is not your traditional LLM that you do after graduating from law school. It is an LLM that you do when you're ready to take the next step in your career with intention, and that intention being practicing international dispute settlement with experience and with a level of maturity that we ensure by requiring a minimum work experience for all applicants. Then the second aspect is that these professionals are dealing mostly with other professionals.
We have a lot of institutional workshops in our program, such as the workshop in ICSID or PCA or ICC. The ICC one takes place in the headquarters of Paris, and it gives students a great opportunity to speak to people who work here, to explain to the students how the teams, how the organization of the whole institution is placed and how the rules of these institutions are significant to what they have specific in them. We also every year have a study trip to Hague where we go to PCA, to the Peace Palace, inside of which we have a very similar sessions with the practitioners, with the people who are working inside of the Peace Palace, explaining to us the history, the significance, the rules of this place, and why is it important and relevant to international dispute resolution.
One of the most interesting opportunities that the LLM offers in terms of career advancement is that as part of the LLM, students are required to do an internship in one arbitration practice or in one arbitration institution. They can also choose to do a thesis. The university will facilitate to the students finding that placement, that internship in the different law firms. And very often that creates the first step into the future career of the students.
What really stood out to me about the program was that the slate of professors and practitioners who had been called in to teach our course were really, really excellent. They were really on the cutting edge of new ideas and working on high-value disputes. And I think most importantly, they were very willing to speak to students and to offer suggestions on how one could get their career started in arbitration in Paris, which is such a competitive market. To summarize how the LLM has contributed to my academic and professional life, it really allowed me to pivot from litigation into international arbitration, not only in terms of learning the hard law, but also in terms of networking opportunities.
I think that actually the TEDS LLM represented an amazing bridge between my previous background and my current position at the World Bank. All the competencies acquired here about investor-state dispute and commercial arbitration had been essential in order to get a good understanding of the practice nowadays of arbitration.
We are now entering into a new era of international litigation where it's very important for whoever is involved in international litigation to be aware of different fields: public international law, private international law, interstate arbitration, dispute settlement before permanent courts like the International Court of Justice, investor-state arbitration, commercial arbitration. And the TATS is just about all that.
I'm currently a fifth-year associate at Skadden Arps in New York. I still refer to my LLM notes all the time, and so I think it has been a huge use to me in my profession, and it's sometimes just to remind myself of the case law, of the rules in arbitration, whether it's investor state or commercial arbitration.
Part of the reason why I chose the Sciences Po LLM was that half of the course is actually taught elsewhere, meaning that you get to learn directly in the law firms and the institutions that are here in Paris, the mecca of European arbitration, and interact and do workshops to learn concepts in practice. My current position where I am for 5 years now in Switzerland, I have had the pleasure to meet my current employer as a guest lecturer in one of the classes that I was taking at Sciences Po. So I would certainly not be where I am right now without the TEDS LLM.
The TATS LLM has been really successful from many perspectives. One of those perspectives is the origin of our candidates. We have had a third of our candidates coming from Asia, a third of the students coming from Latin America, and the other third coming from Europe, North America, Africa, the rest of the world. So this balance in the origin of our students show that it's a real global program. And if we look at the careers after the LLM, it's the same. There are many of them working in the most important law firms or institutions, but they are also all over the world. We have former students working now, applying what they learn and what they have the opportunity to know here in Paris.
If I could ask everyone to please take their seats. Excellent. Thank you all for your patience. The judges have done their scoring. And here to give you further news on that topic is the Security General DRS Director, Dispute Resolution Services, DRS Management, Alex Fesas.
I just realized you're wearing dashingly pink shoes. I wish well, clearly, I feel a little bit underdressed. Good morning, everyone. It's not my intention to monopolize your attention this morning. I think there are bigger and greater things waiting for you after I finish speaking. Earlier this week, I was visited by one of the professionals who participated in the competition this year. It's been participating for many years. A former intern at the ICC many years ago, who is currently writing a monograph on conflict prevention and what we learn on it through mythology, particularly Greek mythology. So you will allow a slight digression for the obvious reason. Menelaus was married to Helen. Paris from Troy visited the Peloponnese and fell in love with Helen, and they decided to elope. Menelaus was not very happy. Conflict. Menelaus had a big brother, Agamemnon, the chief king of the Greeks, warm-blooded, as many Greeks are, and thus started the 10-year Trojan War. Conflict. On year 9, there was discord within the Greek army. Achilles, one of the kings, and arguably probably their best fighter, had a fallout with Agamemnon. Conflict. And he decided to withdraw his troops from the war. His second in command decided to take Achilles' armor and fight for the Greeks disguised as Achilles. And he was challenged by the chief warrior of the Trojans, Hector, another conflict. And he did not survive that challenge. And Hector took over the armor of Achilles as a trophy. That conflict and the loss of his beloved companion led Achilles to reconsider and decide to rejoin the fight. Now, Achilles was a demigod, and his mother, Thetis, pleaded to the equivalent of Vulcan, Hephaestus, the god who was in charge of, among many other things, minerals and craftsmanship, to forge a new armor for her son so that he would be able to challenge Hector and ultimately win the battle and win the war. And Hephaestus did that in record time, as gods do. One of the notable things that Homer does in one of the rhapsodies of the Iliad is describe in great detail the set of arms that Hephaestus forged for this battle. And many, many verses in that rhapsody are dedicated to the description of the various, the iconography on the shield that Hephaestus forged for Achilles. And central to that is a panel where again we see conflict, but not armed conflict, we see two men arguing and a third man in the middle. One man is a killer, someone who murdered a member of the other man's family. And under divine religious law of the time, the family of the victim had a right of retribution. They were therefore very interested in taking the life of the murderer. But then there is this middleman, and the middleman is described by Homer by a name. His name is Istor. And again, I won't give a lecture on etymology here today, but that is a name that actually comes from the same family that gave us history, historians, and so on and so forth. And if we try to translate that name in modern English, probably it's a combination of the knowledgeable communicator, therefore the person who knows and is in a position, probably in a best suited position, to avoid conflict and find just settlement. Now, unfortunately, we don't know what the outcome of that early form of mediation was, but it actually shows us, I think, an important path, and this is why I'm mentioning it here this morning. It tells us of how, ultimately, bigger problems between disputing parties can actually be avoided in ways other than just enforcing rights, but by approaching the conflict on the basis of interests and ways in which those interests can potentially be aligned and ultimately wider conflict avoided. And it is actually for this reason, dear friends, that this competition exists and why ICC is committed to hosting it year after year, and now, of course, over its 23rd edition. So why mediation and why today? I mean, clearly, and I'm probably stating the obvious here, because it strengthens access to justice, and it provides a fast or a faster and a fair and efficient resolution. And we have the data to show it. Let's just compare the average amount of time, the average duration of a mediation compared to that of litigation or indeed arbitration. And the same can go, is my time up? No. Oh, okay. I'll probably have to accelerate. No, it's fine, it's fine. I tend to babble on and on. It also increases economic efficiency. And again, I'm stating the obvious. And it, the same way it reduces waste. Successful or mediated settlements actually lead to fewer disputes having to be written off as losses, and that's extremely important for businesses. It also allows for better enforcement of contracts, and also, of course, the takeaways of a good mediation can then be reinvested into whatever further contractual arrangements either or both of the parties will commit to later on. And importantly, at this day and age, it alleviates some of the strain on supply chains and, importantly, on trade flows. Now, it also protects and, to a certain extent, may even restore commercial relationships. And again, I would like to emphasize the focus on interest-based outcomes. Let's try to find a way in which we can move away from this and continue our business relationship rather than the enforcements of rights-based outcomes. I have a right under this contract to claim damages, and you have an obligation to pay for them. It reduces inequality in access to justice because mediation is by far more flexible than other forms of dispute settlement. It actually requires less of a procedural burden and, of course, again, lower cost. Importantly, it enhances international cooperation. Let's think about the work that has been done on the Singapore Convention, even if that work is very much still in development. Let's think of the EU directive on mediation. Let's also think of the work on mediation that has been done by UNCITRAL, and indeed the plethora of procedural solutions and tools that have been put forward by dispute settlement institutions, including the ICC International Center for ADR. It fosters innovation, and I think this is also an area of development in the future. We will see a lot more tech-enabled, AI-enabled, and digitally enabled solutions being put forward in mediation in the years to come. And perhaps something that we don't necessarily think of it reduces carbon footprints of the carbon footprint of dispute resolution. Fewer flights, potentially fewer in-person meetings or hearings, and of course, less of an administrative overload. And all of that, dear friends, means one thing: mediation works. And we know that because, again, data tells us that if we manage to put the parties, join the parties on the table with a mediator, there's a 70 to 75% chance that there will be a settlement of at least part of their dispute. And therefore, we have a boost of user satisfaction, and we have a lot more confidence restored in private dispute resolution. And this is extremely important, particularly at this day and age. And we therefore ensure a continuity. Now, that is why we at ICC are committed to mediation, and that is why we are resolved to seeing businesses, to supporting businesses worldwide by advocating for mediation. I feel that the mediation competition has been a truly exceptional forum over the past 21 years. There is a sustained commitment from a number of individuals, and I would like, of course, to mention the host of professionals who have dedicated their time and also who have very generously contributed by sharing their expertise. To you, the students, and of course, the biggest thank you must come, or must be given rather, to the students. Now, before I go there, I would like to, and it's not really my custom to give specific shout-outs to individuals, but I would like to make one exception here, if you will indulge me. And I would like to take a minute to salute two individuals, Joy Davis and Greg Bond, for their decades-long commitment to the mediation competition. They have served this forum through various positions, and I think most notably through the revamp of the rules, and helped us improve the overall quality of this competition year in, year out. And while they have decided to step down from that institutional function that they have served, and for which we're extremely thankful, we're equally thankful that they will remain attached to this competition and continue to instill it with their expertise. Now, I mentioned the students, and I would like to finish with the students. So to all of you enthusiastic, wonderful students who have participated this year, very well done. You have demonstrated commitment, mutual respect, and a willingness to grow. And these qualities, I believe, will serve you well beyond this competition. So please, take a moment to appreciate what you have achieved. And hopefully this experience will carry you forward in the years to come. And so truly remember that sky is the limit. Now, I think I must now pass the mic on to Mary, Tat, and Bill, I believe, for a few words. So two of our judges and our wonderful mediator, who also partied last night, I would like to notice.
Alex, thank you. I just want to take a second or two before you hear from the important people to say thank you to everybody for giving me the enormous privilege and honor of mediating the final. To give voice to the obvious unspoken thought of all of us in this room for the last hour and a half, I am prepared to accept the appointment as chairman of FabCool. I know that's what everybody was just wanting to say. Lots of genuine post-mediation emotions. Have I done enough? Have I done too little? Should I have said this? On the train home shortly, I'll be thinking of all the brilliant lines I didn't use. But the teams were very gentle with me. I'm very grateful to them. They were worthy finalists, and it was an absolute honor to work with them today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary McLean, and I'm from San Francisco. I've been coming here for approximately 18 years, and it's a privilege to see all of you. And I wanted to give general comments today. I wanted to first congratulate the two teams. I thought it was an excellent demonstration of advocacy in mediation. Seamlessly, you worked together. You used wording that was open and willing and got the process rolling. I want to speak generally to also all the teams that came here. Do you know there were 58 teams from 34 countries? Look around you. What we hope for you, all of you, is that these 5 days that you've spent in Paris, probably it was longer than 5 days, probably 7, that they're going to be cherished memories that bring you back, no matter, 20, 30 years from now, and that you will always remember this wonderful competition and all the people that you have made friends with. So I know a lot of the teams that competed didn't end up at the final stage, but you're all winners for being here. And you've demonstrated such wonderful, skillful skills for mediation. And we need more of this in the world right now because there's so many sad events happening, but yet we come together from 34 countries in a short amount of time, and we want to continue this legacy. And we hope that you all enjoy your final day here, and thank you all for coming. This competition is because of you. Thank you.
Well, morning everyone. My name is Tat. I'm from Asia, Singapore, and it's my privilege to be here, I think maybe for the 11th or 12th time. I've been tasked to provide maybe a little bit of granularity on how the judges see the competition, the final, and not to speak too long because I know that, of course, what stands between me and after what I've said is the outcome that all of you are waiting for. But let me just keep it to 3 points. I think the first is to acknowledge the brilliance of my colleague, Bill Wood. I think that a lot of you, the word that comes to me as, he's doing his craft is that, a brilliant mediator actually gives you the impression that actually less is more. Delicate question, summary that says both parties want to know what went wrong before they try and fix the problem. Immediately that statement crystallizes the conversations, the dialogue that's been going on between the parties. When asking a question, he says, is that a fair question? He poses, the character of the question and asks the parties to consider whether what he's saying makes sense. Again, the hallmark of a mediator knowing that there's a whole rich layers behind the dialogue, that's what's going on. And then even when he's posing a question to counsel, he asks, what would you think of advising your client on a particular thing? What would you think of advising your client? Posing to a question for the counsel to think about my role as a mediation advocate. Is this the right time? What should I be thinking of? Does that accord with your views? I mean, those are brilliant things that I wrote down, Bill, so that I might use it on a future occasion. But, to Bill Wood, I would say that that was a brilliant demonstration of fantastic mediation by a well-renowned mediator. The second thing that I think is worth talking about is what perhaps the judges thought might be worth thinking about, especially for those of you who have seen the start and the end of this mediation process. All the judges, I think, were unanimous in that both sides delivered a wonderful opening statement with all the richness and with all the nuance of what a great opening statement should be. I think the judges were also of the view that perhaps there could be some consideration of what a great closing would look like. I know, of course, that we are in a forum where it's an artificial construct that we only have a limited amount of time, but one needs to consider when the mediator sounds out that we would shortly be coming to an end, that you need to immediately look to the future and ask those questions among the parties and counsel. What next beyond this, right? Should we be talking about next steps? Should we be asking the mediator for a next appointment? What are the things that we need to do in order to be better prepared for the next round? Should we be entering into an MOU in terms of references? I mean, those are the things which are not artificial construct, but they truly are the kind of things that lawyers would think about when you see the time running out and you do want to continue with the conversation. Very important thing. So a great opening must result in a great landing, a great closing. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is really what stood out for me personally, and I'm sure for the judges as well. And what stood out for me is the level of sophistication in the communication. I practice both as a mediator as well as a mediation advocate, as counsel, and I'm very impressed by what I've seen in display in these competitions, but especially in these finals. And I just want to quickly hit on 5 things that stood out to me. The first thing I thought was, in terms of the communication, was the pace. The pace of the communication was well judged, and more importantly, allowing the listener to follow the discussion and to reflect on what's being said. So often in these competitions, I know that students want to speak very quickly because there's a limited time. And I find myself racing, finding it hard to follow what's going on. When the mediation advocacy is paced, it allows the listener to say, right, that's a great point. What exactly is underlying that point? What's my response to that point? The listener understands and is able to compose an understanding that's richer than if you are racing trying to keep up with the speaker. The second was the tone of both teams were collaborative and constructive. The expressions of intent were framed with a very important forward-looking perspective. Words like, I feel hopeful for the future, but I hope I can clarify the source of your mistrust, putting out what was of concern, but also with an eye on what the future looks like, right? Third, the language used was measured and yet clear, and in my view, very effective. The fourth, I thought was really stood out for me is when questions were posed, when questions were raised, they were not only open-ended, but they were clear and articulate. Can you speak to the success of? I mean, I thought it was brilliant because it opens up so much that can be said in response. What options do you prefer? Again, it opens up the possibility that there will be a great discussion on the options that work for both sides. And so lastly, I thought the other final point that really stood out for me in this competition is the appreciation by both teams of not only what information, what interest needs to be shared, but also what information interest should perhaps be held back until the appropriate time. And I thought it was really sublime that both teams knew what they were after, but in one of the teams, they decided to hold back a particular information and test that with the mediator. Fantastic use of the mediator, because when they were with the mediator, the words used is, I would like you, Bill, at the end to make some space for me to ask a few different things. They are just wonderful choice words. I mean, I don't think I could, better construct words like that in a mediation process where when you present those words, the listener immediately understands, right, what are you talking about is to provide a visual representation of what that dialogue would look like in a wonderful collaborative process that's designed to find common interests and give parties the best shot at getting a good outcome. So those are, the points which I thought really stood out to me. But the litmus test really for me is, would this be a round that in real life I would find, great degree of encouragement? And the short answer for me sitting there is yes. This is such a fantastic round. In real life, I think this would be probably one of the best mediations that I've ever. And I don't say this lightly because I have seen many different spectrums of performances in competitions like this, but this was truly a brilliant round. So on that note, I congratulate both parties and everyone who's here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary and Tat. And one last order of thanks, I think, is due, and that is to our sponsors and our wonderful supporters. I will limit perhaps one specific emphasis to Sciences Po, who have again hosted us in this magnificent amphitheater today. So thank you to Sciences Po, and thank you to Professor Diego Fernandez Arroyo for having done that. Merci de votre soutien et de cet accueil extrêmement chaleureux. So I think we have some awards to give out. Now, the order will be as follows, and I would like everyone's attention in that regard. We are going to start with a joint third. We will then move to the first, and we will conclude with the second. Clear? Clear. All right. So, joint third, and this is no surprise to them because I think they know that already, of course. The finalists, the two semi-finalists that are in the third position are the University of New South Wales and the University of Vienna. Very well done. Congratulations. You're welcome. Alle zusammen. Now, top position. Oh. For the David Plant first prize, Auckland. Excellent, and that means that for the Thierry Jarby second prize, we have the Bucerius School of Law. That is it from us. We look forward to seeing you again next year for the 22nd competition. Please enjoy the cocktail and refreshments that await for you outside. And please enjoy the semi-warm, semi-sunny Parisian Saturday. Thank you all very, very much.